The wagon wheel struck another rut, sending Rebecca Linley's worn leather satchel tumbling from the seat beside her. She caught it before it could spill its contents, a few precious books, her teaching certificates, and the letter that had brought her to this God-forsaken stretch of Wyoming territory. The driver, a grizzled man named Jeb, spat tobacco juice over the side and muttered something about the roads getting worse every year. Rebecca adjusted her modest gray traveling dress and tried not to think about how far she'd come from Missouri. 37 years old, with no family left and a teaching position that had vanished when the Millbrook schoolhouse closed its doors for lack of children. The frontier was swallowing up the small settlements, pulling families westward, always westward. And now, here she was, following that same restless current toward a place called Dust Creek. "Wheels cracked," Jeb announced suddenly, pulling the team to a halt. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as he climbed down to inspect the damage. "Won't make it to Dust Creek like this, ma'am. We're still 15 miles out." Rebecca felt her heart sink. She'd spent nearly all her savings on this journey, and now she climbed down, her boots raising small clouds of dust from the parched earth. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, sagebrush, scattered rocks, and distant mountains that seemed to hover like mirages in the heat. "How long to repair it?" she asked, though she suspected the answer wouldn't be encouraging. Jeb scratched his beard. "Can't fix it proper out here. Need a blacksmith." He squinted at the horizon. "There's a ranch maybe 3 miles north. Could borrow a wagon or get help." 3 miles. In this heat, Rebecca looked at her belongings, calculating what she could carry, before she could decide. The sound of hoofbeats made them both turn. A lone rider approached from the west, moving at an easy lope. As he drew closer, Rebecca could make out details: a young man, perhaps in his mid-20s, wearing the typical garb of a cowhand-worn chaps, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. He reined in his horse, a sturdy bay mare, and touched the brim of his hat. "Afternoon, folks. Trouble." His voice had a pleasant drawl, not quite southern, but carrying hints of somewhere farther east. Rebecca noticed his eyes first, an unusual shade of green, bright against his sun-weathered face. He couldn't have been more than 26 or 27, she judged, with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent his life in the saddle. Jeb explained their predicament while the young man dismounted and examined the wheel. "Yeah, that's done for," he agreed. "I'm headed back to the Double K Ranch that's about 2 miles northwest. We've got a wagon you could use, or I could send someone back with tools." "That's mighty kind of you, Mr. Rebecca ventured. "Callan. Wyatt Callan." He smiled, and she noticed how it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made her uncomfortably aware of her travel-stained appearance. "I work cattle for Mr. Kowalski. You folks heading to Dust Creek?" "I am," Rebecca said. "I'm the new school teacher, Rebecca Linley." Something flickered in his expression: surprise, perhaps, or interest. "School teacher, well, that's good news. The town's been without one since Miss Patterson left to get married last spring." He turned back to Jeb. "Tell you what, I can take Miss Linley and her belongings onto the ranch. We'll send a wagon back for you and your freight. No sense in everyone baking out here." Rebecca hesitated. Propriety dictated that she shouldn't go off with a strange man, even if the circumstances were unusual. But the alternative was sitting in the scorching sun for hours. And something about Wyatt Callan's manner suggested trustworthiness. "That's very generous, Mr. Callan. But I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition, ma'am, Mrs. Kowalski would have my hide if she found out I left a lady stranded out here. Besides, it's on my way." After some negotiation, it was settled. Wyatt helped transfer Rebecca's trunk and satchel, handling her belongings with unexpected care. When it came time to help her mount behind him, he was respectful, averting his eyes as she arranged her skirts as modestly as possible. "Hold on tight, ma'am. Buttercup here's gentle, but the ground's rough." Rebecca had no choice but to place her hands lightly at his waist. She could feel the warmth through his shirt, smell the mixture of leather, horse, and honest work. It had been years since she'd been this close to a man, and she found herself unsettled by her awareness of him. They rode in relative silence at first, the horse picking its way carefully across the terrain. Finally, Wyatt spoke. "First time in Wyoming territory. Yes, I've lived in Missouri all my life. This is quite different." He chuckled. "That's one way to put it. Takes some getting used to. But it grows on you. The space. I mean, the quiet." "Where are you from originally, Mr. Callan, if you don't mind my asking?" "Kentucky, originally. Been out here about 6 years now. Came west after..." He paused. "Well, after I needed a fresh start." Rebecca understood about fresh starts. She was attempting one herself, after all. "Must have been young when you came out here," she observed. 20, he confirmed. Seemed old enough at the time. They crested a small rise, and Rebecca caught her breath. Below them spread a valley, green where a creek wound through it, with buildings clustered near a stand of cottonwoods. It looked like an oasis after the harsh landscape they'd been crossing. "That's the Double K," Wyatt said with evident pride. "Mr. Kowalski's built it up from nothing over the past 10 years. Good man. Fair." As they descended toward the ranch, Rebecca found herself studying her rescuer. His hands on the reins were competent, calloused from work. He sat the horse as if born to it, moving with the animal's gait naturally. There was something appealing about his quiet confidence, the way he'd simply appeared and taken charge of the situation without fuss or fanfare. "You mentioned the town needed a teacher," she said, partly to distract herself from these observations. "Are there many children in Dust Creek?" "About 15 or so of school age, mostly from the surrounding ranches. Some of the hands have families. It's not a big town. We've got Parsons General Store, the church, Murphy's Saloon, and a few other buildings, but folks are hoping to grow. The school's important for that." "And you, do you have children who'll be attending?" He glanced back at her, that smile playing at the corners of his mouth again. "No, ma'am, not married, but I might sit in on a lesson or two myself, if you wouldn't mind." "You didn't have much schooling?" "Some, enough to read and figure, but..." He shrugged. "Always wished I'd had more. Never seemed to be time for it." They were approaching the ranch buildings now. Dogs ran out to greet them, tails wagging. A woman emerged from the main house, shading her eyes with her hand. "That's Mrs. Kowalski," Wyatt said. "She'll take good care of you." He helped Rebecca dismount, his hand steady at her waist for just a moment before stepping back. Mrs. Kowalski, a robust woman in her 50s with graying hair pinned severely back, hurried over. "Wyatt Callan, what have you brought me?" As Wyatt explained the situation, Rebecca found herself studying the ranch. It was well kept, prosperous looking. Several hands were working with horses in a nearby corral, and she could hear the lowing of cattle in the distance. "Of course you must rest and refresh yourself." Mrs. Kowalski was saying, "Come inside, Miss Lindley. Wyatt, see about getting a wagon ready to fetch Jeb and help with that wheel." "Yes, ma'am." He touched his hat to Rebecca. "Pleasure meeting you, Miss Lindley. I expect I'll see you in Dust Creek." "Thank you for your assistance. Mr. Callan, I'm very grateful." He smiled again, that transforming expression, and Rebecca found herself hoping she would indeed see him again. Then she caught herself. She was 37 years old, a spinster schoolteacher coming to a frontier town to teach other people's children. She had no business noticing the way a young cowhand's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how gently he'd helped her from his horse. As Mrs. Kowalski led her inside, chattering about the challenges of finding good teachers and how pleased everyone would be. Rebecca glanced back once. Wyatt was leading his horse toward the barn, moving with that easy stride. He must have felt her gaze because he looked back, raising his hand in a small wave. Rebecca turned away quickly, focusing on Mrs. Kowalski's words. She was here to teach, to make a new life for herself in this rough territory. Nothing more. The fact that a young man with green eyes had rescued her from the roadside meant nothing beyond simple frontier kindness. But as she settled into Mrs. Kowalski's parlor with a glass of cool water, Rebecca couldn't quite dismiss the feeling that her carefully planned fresh start had just become more complicated than she'd anticipated. Outside, she could hear Wyatt's voice giving orders about the wagon, calm and competent. Dust Creek was still 15 miles away. But already Rebecca sensed that her life was about to change in ways she hadn't expected. She sipped her water and tried not to think about green eyes and gentle hands, focusing instead on the challenges ahead. She would need all her concentration for establishing herself in a new community, gaining the trust of parents and children alike. Yet even as she made these sensible resolutions, some part of her was already looking forward to seeing Wyatt Callan again. It was foolish, she told herself firmly. Absolutely foolish. But the high plains of Wyoming Territory seemed to inspire foolishness, and Rebecca Lindley, spinster schoolteacher, found herself oddly willing to embrace it. The town of Dust Creek appeared like a mirage through the afternoon heat haze, a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the vast Wyoming sky. Rebecca gripped the wagon seat as they rolled down the main street, which was little more than a wide dirt track between two rows of structures. Mr. Kowalski himself had driven her to town, his wife insisting he see her safely settled. "There's Parsons' General Store," he pointed out. "And the church at the end of the street, school's behind it. That building there with the blue shutters, that's Mrs. Morley's boarding house, finest accommodation in Dust Creek," which isn't saying much. But Margaret Morley keeps a clean house and sets a good table. Rebecca took in the small town that would be her new home. It was even more modest than she'd imagined, perhaps 24 buildings in all, including what appeared to be stables, a blacksmith's shop, and the inevitable saloon. But the structures looked solid, well-maintained, and there were touches of civilization curtains in windows, a few small gardens fighting the dry soil, and a proper boardwalk in front of the main establishments. Mrs. Morley proved to be a sprightly widow in her 60s with sharp blue eyes and silver hair arranged in an elaborate bun. She emerged from her boarding house before the wagon had fully stopped, hands on her hips, assessing Rebecca with the frank curiosity of someone who'd spent decades sizing up travelers. "So you're our new schoolmarm. About time. I'm Margaret Morley, and you'll be staying with me. I've got the nicest room already, east-facing windows. Catches the morning light. Mr. Kowalski, help bring her things inside. How was the journey? Dear, you look parched." Rebecca found herself swept into the boarding house on a tide of Mrs. Morley's chatter. The interior was surprisingly homey, lace doilies on the furniture, daguerreotypes on the walls, and the smell of baking bread wafting from somewhere in the back. "You're my only boarder at present, Mrs. Morley explained as she led Rebecca upstairs. "Had a traveling preacher last month, stayed for 2 weeks. Nice enough man, but ate like he had a hollow leg. Here we are." The room was indeed pleasant, simple but clean, with a brass bed, a washstand, a small writing desk by the window, and a wardrobe that would hold her modest possessions with room to spare. The promised east-facing windows looked out over the back of the property toward the open prairie. "Supper's at 6 sharp," Mrs. Morley continued. "Breakfast at 7. I can pack you a lunch for school days. Now, let's get you settled, and then I'll show you around town. Everyone's eager to meet you." By evening, Rebecca had been introduced to what seemed like half the population of Dust Creek. There was Samuel Parson, the store owner, a thin, nervous man who assured her he could order any supplies she needed for the school. She met Reverend Davies and his wife at the church, both of them expressing relief that the children would have proper instruction again. Even the blacksmith, a giant of a man named Otto Schultz, stopped his work to welcome her. "My Anna," "She is very smart," he said in heavily accented English. "She needs good teacher. You teach her well, yes." Throughout these introductions, Rebecca found herself scanning the street, looking for a familiar figure on horseback. It was foolish. Wyatt Callan was a ranch hand who'd simply helped a stranded traveler. There was no reason to expect to see him again so soon. She was unpacking her books that evening when Mrs. Morley knocked on her door. "You have a visitor, dear. That young Callan from the Double K says he has something for you." Rebecca's heart gave an unexpected flutter. She smoothed her hair and followed Mrs. Morley downstairs. Wyatt stood in the parlor, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable among the doilies and delicate furniture. "Evening, Miss Linley. Sorry to disturb you, but you left this at the ranch." He held out a small, leather-bound volume, her copy of Wordsworth's poems. It must have fallen from her satchel during the transfer. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Callan. I hadn't even noticed it was missing yet." She took the book, their fingers brushing briefly. "It was kind of you to ride all this way to return it." "No trouble. I was coming to town anyway." He shifted his weight, seemed about to say something more, then simply nodded. "I'll let you get back to settling in." "Would you like some coffee before you go?" Mrs. Morley offered. "Just made a fresh pot." "Thank you, ma'am, but I should be heading back." He settled his hat on his head, touched the brim to both ladies. "Evening." After he'd gone, Mrs. Morley gave Rebecca a speculative look. "Fine young man, Wyatt Callan, steady, reliable. Shame he's not much for socializing. Keeps to himself mostly, though he's polite enough when he comes to town." Rebecca opened her book of poems, and a small piece of paper fluttered out. In careful, unpracticed handwriting, someone had copied out 2 lines. "The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending. We lay waste our powers." There was no signature, but Rebecca knew who had written it. She stared at the words, wondering. Had he read her book while bringing it to her, the thought of Wyatt Callan cowhand, reading Wordsworth by lamplight, was oddly touching. The next morning, Rebecca made her first official visit to the schoolhouse. It was a single-room building, sturdy but showing signs of months without use. Dust covered everything. One window was cracked, and the door hung slightly askew on its hinges. She was standing in the doorway, mentally cataloging necessary repairs, when she heard footsteps behind her. "Needs some work." She turned to find Wyatt leaning against the doorframe. In the morning light, she could see his face more clearly than during their previous encounters. There was a small scar through his left eyebrow, and his green eyes held an intelligence that belied his rough occupation. "Mr. Callan, good morning." "Morning. Heard you were coming to look at the school today. Thought you might need help." He gestured to a toolbox at his feet. "I'm pretty handy with repairs." "That's very kind, but surely you have work at the ranch." "Day off," he said simply. "And the town needs its school ready. Where should we start?" The plural pronoun wasn't lost on Rebecca. She knew she should politely decline, maintain proper distance. Instead, she found herself saying, "The door seems the most urgent problem." They worked through the morning. Wyatt was indeed handy with tools, fixing the door, replacing the cracked window pane, and even repairing several broken desk benches. Rebecca swept and scrubbed, arranged the few textbooks left behind, and tried not to notice how easily he moved around the space, how his presence seemed to fill the small room. "You've done this before," she observed as he expertly planed down a stick spot on the door. "Helped build a schoolhouse once, back in Kentucky. I was just a boy. But I remember thinking it was important work, building something for learning." He tested the door's swing, satisfied with the smooth movement. "Never got to attend much myself. Had to work soon as I was old enough to hold a rope." "But you read," Rebecca said, thinking of the Wordsworth quotation. He glanced at her, a slight flush coloring his weathered cheeks. "Some, when I can Found that book of yours had fallen open. Hope you don't mind that I looked. Not at all. Do you enjoy poetry? Never had much exposure to it. But those words, they seem true, about how people get caught up in things that don't matter. He set down his tools, dusted his hands on his pants. My mother used to read to us when I was small. Bible mostly, but sometimes other things. She'd have liked knowing there was poetry about ordinary life. Would have. She passed when I was 12. Fever took her and my 2 sisters. He said it simply, without seeking sympathy, just stating fact. I'm sorry. Long time ago now. He surveyed their morning's work. This should do for the basics. You'll want to air it out for a few days before the children come. They stood together in the doorway, looking out at the dusty street. Rebecca was acutely aware of him beside her, the solid presence, the quiet competence. He smelled of soap and leather and something indefinably masculine. Why do you hide it? She asked suddenly. That you can read. I mean, yesterday you said you could read and figure as if it were barely anything. He was quiet for a moment. Out here, people expect certain things from a cowhand. Being too bookish. It makes folks uncomfortable. Easier to keep some things private. Rebecca understood about keeping things private, about the faces we show the world versus who we really are. Well, she said, if you ever want to borrow a book, you're welcome to. I brought several with me. That's kind of you. He picked up his toolbox. I should let you get on with your day. When do you start teaching? Monday, 3 days to finish preparing. If you need anything else fixed, Mrs. Morley knows where to find me. He paused, seemed to wrestle with something, then added, Welcome to Dust Creek, Miss Linley. The town's lucky to have you. He was gone before she could respond, striding down the street with that easy walk of his. Rebecca watched until he turned the corner, then chided herself for staring. She was acting like a schoolgirl, not a mature woman and professional educator. But as she continued cleaning the schoolhouse, she found herself humming something she hadn't done in months. The simple room with its rows of benches and slate board seemed full of possibility. And if some of that possibility included green eyes and work-roughened hands that handled books with surprising gentleness, well, that was her secret to keep. By evening, word had spread that the new teacher was fixing up the school. Several parents stopped by to introduce themselves and their children. Rebecca met the Schultz children, Anna, who was indeed bright-eyed and eager, the Patterson boys, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, and little Mary Chen, whose father ran the laundry and whose mother had died the previous winter. You'll have your hands full with my boys, Mrs. Patterson warned. They've run a bit wild without school to keep them busy. I'm sure we'll manage, Rebecca assured her, though she mentally noted the warning. That night, as she prepared for bed in her small room, Rebecca reflected on her first full day in Dust Creek. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself at 37, far from family and familiarity, in a town that could fit inside a single block of St. Louis. But there was something here, some spark of possibility that she hadn't felt in years. From her window, she could see the vast prairie stretching endlessly under the stars. Somewhere out there, on one of those ranches, Wyatt Callan was probably ending his day too. Did he think of her? Did he regret showing her that glimpse of his deeper self? Rebecca shook her head at her own foolishness and climbed into bed. She had a school to prepare, children to teach, a life to build. Whatever else Dust Creek might offer would have to wait. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, with a crispness in the air that hinted at autumn's approach. Rebecca stood at the doorway of the schoolhouse, watching as children began arriving from various directions. Some walked from town. Others rode in on horseback or in wagons driven by parents or older siblings. She had 12 students in all, ranging from 6-year-old Mary Chen to 15-year-old Thomas Patterson. They filed in with varying degrees of enthusiasm, the younger ones chattering excitedly while the older boys slouched in with studied indifference. Good morning, children. Please find a seat, younger students toward the front, older ones in back. Anna Schultz, 11 years old with her father's determined chin and bright blue eyes, claimed a front bench immediately. The Patterson boys, Thomas and Robert, sprawled in the back row, already testing boundaries. Between them arranged the others, the Henning twins, Sarah and Samuel, Jorge Martinez, whose family ran sheep on the outskirts of town, Quiet Ellen Murphy, whose father owned the saloon, and several children from outlying ranches. Rebecca had barely begun her introduction when the door opened again. Wyatt Callan stood there, hat in hand, looking somewhat sheepish. "Sorry to interrupt, Miss Lindley. Just wanted to check that door was still working smooth." Thomas Patterson snickered. "Come to learn your letters. Callan." Rebecca saw something flash in Wyatt's eyes, not anger, but a kind of resigned hurt he quickly masked. "Door seems fine," he said quietly, starting to turn away. "Mr. Callan," Rebecca said, making a quick decision. "Since you're here, perhaps you could help me with something. Children, Mr. Callan is going to assist with our first lesson about the local geography. He knows this land better than anyone." Wyatt looked startled. "Ma'am, I don't think—" "Please." She met his eyes, willing him to understand. "It would be most helpful." He hesitated, then stepped inside, moving to stand near the wall. Rebecca pulled down the map of Wyoming territory she'd hung the day before. "Now then, who can show me where Dust Creek is located?" Several hands shot up. As the children took turns identifying landmarks, Rebecca drew Wyatt into the discussion, asking him about water sources, the best grazing lands, the migration patterns of local wildlife. Gradually, his discomfort eased as he shared his knowledge, and even the Patterson boys leaned forward to listen when he described tracking wolves through the winter snow. "Mr. Callan," little Mary Chen piped up, "is it true you once rode all the way to Cheyenne in 2 days?" "Where'd you hear that, Missy?" "My papa said so. Said you were riding to fetch medicine when the fever came through." Wyatt shifted uncomfortably. "Wasn't just me. Several of us rode out. People needed help." Rebecca filed this information away, another glimpse of the man beneath the quiet exterior. "Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, Mr. Callan. Children, let's thank our guest." A chorus of thank yous followed Wyatt as he made his escape, but not before catching Rebecca's eye with a look of gratitude mixed with something else, warmth, perhaps, or recognition of what she'd done for him. The rest of the morning flew by. Rebecca assessed reading levels. Discovering a wide range, Anna Schultz read fluently while some of the ranch children struggled with basic words. Mathematics proved similarly varied. She made mental notes, already planning how to manage such diverse abilities in one room. At lunch, the children scattered outside to eat their packed meals. Rebecca was organizing her desk when she noticed Thomas Patterson lingering. "Miss Lindley, why'd you do that stand up for Callan? I mean—" She considered her answer carefully. "Everyone deserves respect. Thomas, Mr. Callan is a valued member of this community. My PA says cowboys are just drifters. Here today, gone tomorrow. Says they got no learning and no ambition beyond the next cattle drive." "And what do you think?" Thomas shrugged, but she could see him pondering. "Callan's been here longer than most, never causes trouble. Ma says he's decent enough." "Perhaps we shouldn't judge people by their occupation alone," Rebecca suggested gently. "Now, you'd better eat your lunch before afternoon lessons." The afternoon brought its own challenges. The younger children grew restless, the room became stuffy, and Robert Patterson demonstrated his skill with a slingshot by knocking a book off Rebecca's desk when her back was turned. She confiscated the weapon calmly, assigned him extra arithmetic problems, and carried on. By the time 3 o'clock arrived, Rebecca was exhausted, but satisfied. The children filed out with homework assignments, nothing too ambitious for the first day, but enough to establish expectations. She was erasing the blackboard when she heard boots on the steps again. Wyatt appeared in the doorway. this time carrying a bucket and some tools. "Thought I'd patch those holes in the roof before the rains come," he said without preamble. "Won't disturb you if you're working." "You don't have to." "Want to?" He set down his supplies. "That was kind. What you did earlier didn't have to include me. Thomas Patterson was being cruel. I won't tolerate that in my classroom." Wyatt climbed onto a desk to reach the ceiling. "Boy's just repeating what he hears. His pa's not wrong about most cowhands. We do drift, don't usually stick around long enough to matter. You've been here 6 years. That's different." "Why?" He concentrated on removing damaged boards. "Found something worth staying for, I guess. Good work, decent people, place to belong." Rebecca watched him work, competent and focused. "Do you ever think about doing something else?" "Sometimes." He glanced down at her. "Man can dream about lots of things. Doesn't mean they're possible." "I've found that more things are possible than we initially believe." He smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his weathered features. "Maybe so. Miss Linley, maybe so." They worked in companionable silence, he on the roof, she preparing lessons for the next day. Occasionally, he'd ask her about her teaching methods, or she'd inquire about something related to the local area that might interest the children. "You're good with them," he observed, fitting a new board in place. "Patient but firm. They need that." "It helps that I enjoy it. Teaching. I mean, even when Robert Patterson is testing every boundary he can find." Wyatt chuckled. "Boy's got spirit. Reminds me of myself at that age, always pushing to see what I could get away with." "And did you get away with things?" "Not often. My PA had strong opinions about behavior. Backed them up with a firm hand when necessary." Something in his tone made Rebecca look up sharply, but his expression was neutral, focused on his work. "There," he said, climbing down. "Should hold through winter, though you might want to get the board to approve proper repairs come spring." "Thank you. What do I owe you for materials and labor?" He looked almost offended. "Nothing. Community takes care of its own." Before she could protest, he was packing up his tools. "Best head home before dark. Mrs. Morley worries if her boarders are out late." Rebecca walked with him to the door. The afternoon sun slanted across the prairie, painting everything golden. "Will you come back?" she asked impulsively. "To visit the class again, the children enjoyed your stories." He paused, hat in hand. "If you think it would help, don't want to intrude." "It wouldn't be intruding. Perhaps once a week you could share practical knowledge, things they can't learn from books." "I'll think on it." He settled his hat, touched the brim. "Evening, Miss Linley." She watched him walk to his horse, mount with that easy grace, and ride off toward the Double K. The schoolhouse felt emptier without him in it, which was ridiculous. She'd known the man less than a week. Back at the boarding house, Mrs. Morley was full of questions about the first day. Over supper, a hearty stew with fresh bread, Rebecca shared the successes and challenges, carefully omitting any mention of Wyatt's visits. "The Patterson boys will come around," Mrs. Morley predicted. "Their mother's a good woman. She'll support you. Now, tell me about the others." They discussed each child, with Mrs. Morley providing helpful background. Jorge Martinez's family had faced prejudice, but were slowly earning acceptance. Ellen Murphy carried the burden of her father's occupation. Running a saloon made some townsfolk look askance at the family. The ranch children often missed school during busy seasons. "And Wyatt Callan helped with repairs again today," Rebecca mentioned casually. "Mrs. Morley's eyes sharpened. "Did he now? That's 3 times he's been by the school." "He's being helpful. The roof leaked." The older woman's tone was knowing. "Wyatt Callan hasn't shown that much interest in the schoolhouse in all the years he's been here. Funny how that's changed." Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He's simply being neighborly." "Of course. Dear, more stew." That night, Rebecca lay in bed thinking about the day. It had gone better than expected. The children were eager to learn. Even the reluctant ones showed potential, and she felt the stirrings of real community connection. And yes, if she was honest, Wyatt's presence had added something special to the day. The way he'd shared his knowledge, the quiet competence of his repairs, the unexpected depth suggested by their conversations, all of it intrigued her more than was wise. She was 37, she reminded herself. He was at least 10 years younger. She was the school teacher, meant to be above reproach. He was a cowhand who, by his own admission, might drift away despite his years in Dust Creek. But when she finally drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of green eyes and gentle hands, of a voice sharing stories about the land, of possibilities that bloomed like prairie flowers after rain. Tuesday dawned cloudy, with a smell of rain in the air. Rebecca arrived at school early to find a small package on her desk, a handful of late-blooming wildflowers tied with twine and a note in that same careful handwriting for brightening the classroom, W.C. She arranged the flowers in a jar on her desk. Touched by the simple gesture, when Anna Schultz arrived early, she noticed them immediately. Pretty flowers, Miss Linley, blue asters and prairie roses. They grow near the creek. Yes, they are lovely, Rebecca agreed, not mentioning their source. But Anna was a perceptive child. Mr. Callan knows all the best spots for wildflowers. He brought some to Ma when she was sick last winter. Another piece of the puzzle that was Wyatt Callan, a rough cowhand who brought flowers to sick neighbors and secretly read poetry. Rebecca was beginning to understand that in Dust Creek, as perhaps everywhere, people were far more complex than their surface appearances suggested. The storm arrived just after lunch on Thursday, rolling across the prairie like a great gray wall. Rebecca watched through the schoolhouse windows as lightning flickered in the distance and the first fat drops of rain began to fall. The children grew restless, glancing nervously at the darkening sky. "Perhaps we should dismiss early," Rebecca announced, noting how the younger ones flinched at each thunder crack. "Those of you who live nearby, head straight home. Anyone from the outlying ranches should wait here until—" The door burst open, bringing a gust of wind and rain. Wyatt Callan stood there, water already dripping from his hat brim. "Sorry to interrupt, Miss Linley. Mr. Patterson sent me to fetch his boys' bridge over Willow Creek is already rising. Any other ranch kids here need to leave now if they're going to make it home." Organized chaos ensued as Rebecca helped children into coats and checked who needed to leave immediately. Jorge Martinez and the Henning twins joined the Patterson boys. Climbing into the wagon Wyatt had brought, that left her with 6 students whose families lived in town. "I can come back for you once I get these ones safe," Wyatt offered, raising his voice over the increasing wind. "No need. We'll wait out the storm here. The building's sound thanks to your repairs." He hesitated, clearly torn between duties. "You sure this looks to be a big one?" "We'll be fine. Go, before the roads become impassable." He nodded, ushering the ranch children out. Rebecca watched the wagon disappear into the gray sheets of rain, then turned back to her remaining students, Anna Schultz, Mary Chen, Ellen Murphy, and 3 others looked at her with varying degrees of worry. "Well then," she said brightly, "who knows any good stories?" For the next hour, she kept the children distracted with tales and songs. The storm intensified, rain hammering the roof and wind rattling the windows. During a particularly violent gust, the repaired door flew open, banging against the wall. Rebecca struggled to close it, but the wind was too strong. She was just considering whether to risk sending the older children for help when a figure loomed out of the storm. Wyatt, soaked to the skin, pushed past her and forced the door shut, dropping a wooden bar across it that she hadn't noticed before. "Thought you might need this," he said, water pooling around his boots. "Storms worse than expected. Trees down on Main Street." "Mr. Callan, you're soaked through." Rebecca grabbed a cloth from her desk. Wholly inadequate, but better than nothing. "Children, move away from the windows. We'll sit in the center of the room." Wyatt helped her arrange the benches in a protective circle. His presence immediately calmed the children. Here was someone who knew about storms, who'd ridden through worse. He shrugged out of his coat, wringing it out in a corner. "Did the others make it home safely?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Got them all delivered? The Martinez place was already flooding some, but Jorge's PA was ready for it." He glanced at the remaining children. "Town kids should be fine to wait it out. Building's solid." As if to test his words, something crashed against the side of the schoolhouse. Little Mary Chen whimpered, and Ellen Murphy put a protective arm around her. "Just a tree branch," Wyatt said calmly. "This old place has weathered plenty of storms. Say, who knows the story about how Dust Creek got its name?" The children shook their heads, distracted from their fear. "Well now." Wyatt settled onto one of the benches, seemingly unbothered by his wet clothes. "This was back before the town was properly settled. A wagon train got caught in a drought year." He spun the tale with quiet skill, his voice competing with the storm, but somehow creating a calm center in the chaos. Rebecca found herself watching him as much as the children did, the way his hands moved to illustrate points, how he modulated his voice to build suspense, the patience with which he answered interruptions. "Is that really true?" Anna asked when he finished. "My boss, Mr. Kowalski, swears his uncle was on that wagon train. Course, stories grow with telling." He winked at the girl. "But the best stories have truth at their heart, even if the details get decorated." The storm showed no signs of abating. Rebecca checked her watch. Nearly 4 o'clock. Parents would be worried. "I should try to get word to their families," she said to Wyatt. "Too dangerous now. They'll know the children are safe here with you." He studied the ceiling as a particularly strong gust shook the building. "Though I'm glad I fixed that roof when I did." They passed another hour with stories and quiet games. Wyatt taught the children a word game cowboys played on long drives, and Rebecca shared riddles she'd learned in Missouri. When Mary Chen dozed off, curled on a bench with her head in Ellen's lap, Wyatt found an old horse blanket in the storage corner and draped it over her. The simple tenderness of the gesture made Rebecca's throat tight. She caught him watching her over the sleeping child and looked away, busying herself with straightening already straight supplies. By 5:30, the storm had begun to ease. The rain still fell steadily, but the violence had passed. Parents began arriving, wet and worried, profoundly grateful to find their children safe. Otto Schultz crushed Rebecca's hand in his massive grip, thanking her in a mix of English and German. "Mrs." Murphy actually hugged her. Soon only Rebecca and Wyatt remained in the schoolhouse. The silence after so much noise felt profound. "You were wonderful with them." Rebecca said, "Thank you. You had it handled. I just told a few yarns." He retrieved his still damp coat. "I should check on the livestock, make sure this storm didn't cause too much damage." "Of course." She hesitated. "Wyatt, Mr. Callan, will you really come back to visit the class as we discussed? The children responded so well to you today." He paused at the door. "If you're sure. Don't want folks talking." "Let them talk. The children's education is what matters." Something shifted in his expression. "You're not what I expected. Rebecca Linley." It was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it in his low voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "What did you expect?" "Someone more careful. I guess most teachers I've known were all about rules and propriety. He seemed to search for words. "You're real. You see people for who they are, not just what they do." Before she could respond, he was gone, striding out into the lessening rain. Rebecca stood in the empty schoolhouse, heart beating faster than it should. She touched the wildflowers on her desk, now slightly wilted but still bright. The walk back to the boarding house was wet and muddy, but Rebecca hardly noticed. Mrs. Morley fussed over her, insisting on hot tea and a warm bath. Heard Wyatt Callan spent the storm at the school, the older woman mentioned casually as she heated water. That was fortunate. He was very helpful with the children. I'm sure he was. Mrs. Morley's tone was carefully neutral. Man's got a good heart, for all he keeps to himself. Did you know he sends money back east every month? Regular as clockwork. No, I didn't know that. Parson down at the store handles the transfers. Says it goes to a family in Kentucky. Wyatt never speaks of it, but Sam Parson figured it might be his father's people, taking care of them even from out here. Another layer to the mystery. Rebecca soaked in the hip bath, washing away the day's mud and stress, but her mind kept circling back to those moments in the storm, the way Wyatt had arrived just when needed, his easy manner with the children, the look in his eyes when he'd said her name. She was treading dangerous ground. She knew it, recognized all the warning signs from her previous heartbreak. A younger man, a different social position, the gossiping tongues of a small town, all the elements were there for disaster. But she couldn't forget how right it had felt, sitting with him and the children while the storm raged outside. How natural, how complete, as if pieces of a puzzle she didn't know she was solving had suddenly clicked into place. That night, she wrote in her journal, the storm brought unexpected revelations. T proved himself not just helpful, but truly gifted with children. There's depth there that circumstances have prevented from full expression. I find myself thinking dangerous thoughts. Must remember my position, my purpose here, yet cannot deny the connection I feel. Is it wrong to want more than just duty and respectability at 37? Do I dare hope for something beyond the classroom? She set down her pen, gazing out at the rain-washed night. Somewhere in the darkness, Wyatt Callan was probably checking cattle, mending fences, doing the hard work that kept this frontier community alive. Tomorrow she would return to her classroom, he to his ranch work. But something had shifted between them today, some boundary crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Rebecca blew out her lamp and settled into bed. Through her window, she could see stars beginning to peek through the breaking clouds. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh. Everything would look different in the morning light, clearer, perhaps, or maybe just more complicated. But for now, in the darkness, she allowed herself to remember the sound of her name in his voice, the safety of his presence in the storm, the possibility of something more than the lonely independence she'd resigned herself to. It was foolish, perhaps, but on this wild frontier where storms could trap you with unexpected companions and cowboys read poetry in secret, perhaps a little foolishness was exactly what was needed. The morning would bring its own challenges and choices, but tonight, Rebecca Linley fell asleep with something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The full moon hung like a silver dollar in the Wyoming sky, casting shadows across the grassland that rippled like a vast sea. It had been 3 weeks since the storm, and Wyatt's visits to the classroom had become a regular occurrence. Every Friday afternoon, he would appear with some practical lesson for the children: rope work, weather reading, animal tracking. Rebecca told herself it was purely educational, but she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest each time his boots sounded on the schoolhouse steps. Tonight was different. After supper at the boarding house, Wyatt had appeared at Mrs. Morley's door, hat in hand, with an unusual request. Evening, Miss Linley, Mrs. Morley. I wondered if you'd like to see something special. The moon's full, and there's a place up on Sentinel Ridge where you can see the whole valley. Thought you might appreciate it, being new to the territory and all. Mrs. Morley had practically pushed Rebecca out the door. Lovely idea. I'd join you myself if these old bones didn't protest at riding. You young people go ahead. And so Rebecca found herself riding beside Wyatt through the moonlit prairie, her borrowed divided skirt allowing her to sit the gentle mare he'd brought for her. They rode in comfortable silence, the only sounds the soft thud of hooves on earth and the distant cry of a coyote. Thank you for the riding lessons, Rebecca said eventually. I never imagined I'd need to know how to ride out here. Essential skill in this country. You're taking to it natural-like." He glanced at her, his face shadowed by his hat brim. "Most things you've taken to natural-like since coming here." They began ascending a gentle slope, the horses picking their way carefully. Rebecca tried not to think about how isolated they were, how improper this would be considered back in Missouri. But this wasn't Missouri, and the rules seemed different under this vast sky. "There," Wyatt said softly as they crested the ridge. "This is what I wanted you to see." Rebecca gasped. Spread below them was the entire valley, bathed in moonlight. Dust Creek looked like a child's toy village from this height, its few lights twinkling warmly. Beyond stretched the endless grassland, silver and shadow, rolling away to where mountains rose like distant dreams on the horizon. Wyatt dismounted and helped her down, his hands steady at her waist. They stood side by side, taking in the magnificent view. "It's beautiful," Rebecca breathed. "I've never seen anything like it." "First time I saw it, I knew I'd found where I belonged," Wyatt said quietly. "Been 6 years, and it still takes my breath away." They found a flat rock to sit on, the stone still warm from the day's sun. Below them, the world seemed peaceful, eternal. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca ventured. "Mrs. Morley mentioned you send money back to Kentucky. Family." Wyatt was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke. "My father's family. After Ma died. Pa, well, he took to drink, lost the farm, everything. I left at 16, worked my way west. When I started earning steady money, I began sending what I could to my aunt. She's raising my youngest brother." "That's admirable." He shrugged. "Family's family, even when they're far away." "Is that why you don't talk about going back?" "Partly. Nothing there for me now, except obligations I can meet from here." He picked up a small stone, rolled it between his fingers. "Other reasons, too." Rebecca waited, having learned that Wyatt's silences often preceded his most honest words. "I came west running from something," he admitted. "Made mistakes as a young man. Nothing criminal, just foolish. Thought I was in love with a girl above my station. Her family made it clear I wasn't suitable. There were words, then fists. I hurt her brother pretty bad in the fight. Had to leave quick." "You were young." "Young and stupid, but it taught me something about knowing your place." He looked at her then, moonlight catching his eyes. "Maybe taught me too well." The implication hung between them. Rebecca felt her heart racing. Places aren't as fixed as people think. We can change our circumstances. "Can we? You're an educated woman, a teacher. I'm just a cowhand who can barely write his own name proper." "You're one of the most intelligent men I've met," Rebecca said firmly. "You read, you think, you understand people and land and life in ways that can't be taught in schools." "That's kind of you to say." "It's not kindness. It's truth." She turned to face him fully. "Why do you think I keep asking you back to the classroom? The children learn more from one of your visits than from a week of my textbooks." Rebecca, her name on his lips was almost a warning. "I know," she said softly. "I know all the reasons why this is unwise. The age difference, the social expectations, the gossip it would cause. I've told myself every argument. But Wyatt, when I'm with you, none of that seems to matter." He stood abruptly, walked a few steps away. "You don't know what you're saying." "Don't I?" She rose too, moved to stand beside him. "I'm 37 years old. I've been disappointed in love before. Had my heart broken by a man who chose propriety over feeling. I came west thinking that part of my life was over. Then I met you. I've got nothing to offer you. No proper house, no prospects beyond ranch work. You deserve better. I deserve someone who sees me as I am, not as they think I should be. Someone who brings me wildflowers and fixes my schoolhouse and treats me like I matter." Wyatt turned to her then, his face full of anguish. "Of course you matter. You matter too much. Don't you see? That's why I keep trying to keep my distance. Because every time I'm near you, I forget all the reasons I should stay away. They stood facing each other in the moonlight, the vast prairie stretching around them. Rebecca could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge, advance or retreat, hope or safety. What if, she said quietly, just for tonight, we stopped thinking about should and shouldn't? What if we just were... Rebecca, I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I'm just asking you to stop running from this. She took a breath, gathered her courage. If you can look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing, I'll never mention it again. We'll go back to being teacher and occasional classroom visitor. But if you feel what I feel... Wyatt was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. Then, so gently she might have imagined it, he reached up and touched her cheek. I've been feeling it since the moment I saw you on that broken-down wagon. He admitted, like something in me recognized something in you. It scared me half to death. And now, still scared? His thumb traced her cheekbone. But maybe you're right about not living scared. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Rebecca didn't move, couldn't move, could barely breathe as his lips found hers in the gentlest of kisses. It was sweet and careful and over too soon, leaving her trembling. I'm no good at this, Wyatt murmured against her hair. Never learned how to court a lady proper. I don't need proper courting, Rebecca whispered. I just need you to be yourself. They stood together on the ridge, her head against his shoulder, watching the moon paint silver paths across the grassland. Everything had changed with that kiss, crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Tomorrow would bring complications, questions, the need for discretion in a small town where everyone watched everyone else. But for now, they had the vast sky, the endless prairie, and the fragile, blooming thing between them that felt as natural as breathing. We should head back, Wyatt said eventually, though he made no move to let her go. Mrs. Morley will worry. Yes, Rebecca stepped back reluctantly. Wyatt, what happens now? He helped her mount her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. I don't know. Never been down this trail before, but maybe we can figure it out together. I'd like that. They rode back slowly, not talking much, but aware of each other in a new way. The town came into view, lights warm against the darkness. Real life waited their responsibilities, expectations, the careful dance of maintaining reputations. At the boarding house, Wyatt helped her dismount, holding her perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Friday? She asked. You'll still come to the school? Wouldn't miss it. He touched his hat brim, the formal gesture at odds with the warmth in his eyes. Good night, Rebecca. Good night, Wyatt. She watched him ride away, then turned to find Mrs. Morley watching from the parlor window, a knowing smile on her face. Rebecca braced for questions, but the older woman simply said, Nice night for a ride. You'll want some tea before bed. In her room later, Rebecca pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of Wyatt's kiss. Outside her window, the moon continued its journey across the sky, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. She'd come to Wyoming territory seeking a new life, a fresh start after disappointment. She'd found that and more, found challenge and purpose and community. And now, perhaps, she'd found something else, something she'd never dared hope for. It wouldn't be easy. The path ahead was uncertain, full of obstacles. But as Rebecca prepared for bed, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow she would return to her classroom, Wyatt to his work. They would have to be careful, discreet. But they would also have Friday afternoons and perhaps other stolen moments. They would have the memory of moonlight on the prairie and the promise of figuring things out together. For a woman who'd thought her chances at love were behind her, it felt like a miracle. And in the vast, wild spaces of Wyoming territory, under skies big enough to hold any dream, perhaps miracles were possible after all. The whispers started small, like tumbleweeds gathering before a storm. A knowing look here, a raised eyebrow there. Rebecca first noticed them at Parsons' general store when two women stopped talking abruptly as she entered. By the time she reached the schoolhouse that morning, she could feel the weight of eyes following her progress down Main Street. It had been 2 weeks since the moonlight ride with Wyatt. They'd been careful he still came for his Friday visits to the classroom, maintaining proper distance in public. But in a town as small as Dust Creek, nothing stayed hidden for long. Rebecca was arranging books when Mrs. Harriet Jameson swept into the schoolhouse, a formidable woman married to one of the town's most prosperous ranchers. She considered herself the guardian of Dust Creek's moral standards. "Miss Linley, we need to discuss a delicate matter." Rebecca's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "Good morning, Mrs. Jameson. How may I help you?" "It's come to my attention that you've been keeping company with that cowhand from the Double K, riding out alone with him at night." The woman's thin lips pursed in disapproval. "Surely you understand how inappropriate this appears." "Mr. Callan has been kind enough to assist with school repairs and share his knowledge with the students. I'm not talking about school hours." "Miss Linley..." Mrs. Jameson's voice cut like a blade. "You're meant to be a moral example for our children, gallivanting about with a man young enough to be, well, significantly younger than yourself. It's unseemly." Heat rose in Rebecca's cheeks. "I fail to see how my age or Mr. Callan's has any bearing on—" "Don't be naive. You know exactly what people are saying. That you're making a fool of yourself over a common ranch hand. That you're—" She paused dramatically. "Desperate." The word hung in the air like a slap. Rebecca gripped the edge of her desk, fighting to maintain composure. "I've conducted myself with complete propriety, Mrs. Jameson. If people choose to gossip about innocent interactions—" "Innocent?" The woman laughed. A sharp, unpleasant sound. "My dear, nothing about an aging spinster chasing after a young cowboy appears innocent. It appears pathetic." "That's enough." Rebecca's voice came out stronger than she felt. "I'll thank you to leave my classroom now." Mrs. Jameson's eyes glittered with malice. "Consider this a friendly warning, Miss Linley. The school board meets next month. It would be a shame if questions arose about your suitability for this position." After she left, Rebecca sank into her chair, hands trembling. She'd known there would be talk, but the viciousness of the attack left her shaken. When the children arrived, she struggled to maintain her usual warmth, going through lessons mechanically. At lunch, Anna Schultz lingered after the other children ran outside. "Miss Linley, are you feeling well?" Rebecca managed to smile. "Just a headache, dear." "My mama says Mrs. Jameson is a bitter old crow who likes making others miserable." The girl's frank assessment startled a laugh from Rebecca. "You shouldn't repeat such things, Anna." "But it's true, isn't it? She made our last teacher cry too. That's why Miss Patterson really left not to get married, but because Mrs. Jameson kept criticizing everything she did." This was news to Rebecca. "How do you know this?" "I listen. Adults think children don't understand, but we do." Anna tilted her head. "Is she being mean about Mr. Callan visiting our class?" "It's complicated, dear." "No, it's not. Mr. Callan helps us learn things. He makes you smile. Mrs. Jameson doesn't like when people are happy." The girl's simple logic was oddly comforting. That afternoon, Rebecca dismissed class early, claiming the headache that had become real. She walked slowly back to the boarding house, aware of eyes following her progress. On the porch of Murphy's saloon, she heard someone snicker. "Mrs." Morley took one look at her face and guided her to the kitchen. "Sit, tea first, then talk." Rebecca found herself pouring out the whole encounter. "Mrs." Morley listened, her expression growing increasingly thunderous. "Harriet Jameson is a hypocrite and a bully," she declared. Married a man 20 years older than herself for his money, then has the gall to judge others. But she has influence. If she turns the board against me, she won't. Oh, she'll try. But there are plenty of us who won't stand for it. Mrs. Morley's eyes glinted. That woman's driven off 2 teachers already with her meddling. The town won't let her do it again. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Morley returned with a concerned-looking Reverend Davies. Miss Linley, I heard about this morning's unpleasantness. I wanted to assure you that not everyone shares Mrs. Jameson's views. That's kind of you, Reverend. I also wanted to warn you. She's stirring up trouble, visiting other board members, spreading insinuations. He cleared his throat. It might be wise to be especially circumspect in your behavior for a while. You mean I should stop allowing Mr. Callan to visit the classroom? It might be prudent. Rebecca felt something harden inside her. With respect, Reverend Mr. Callan's visits are educational and beneficial to the students. I won't punish the children because of narrow-minded gossip. The Reverend looked uncomfortable. I understand your position, but sometimes discretion is cowardice by another name. Rebecca finished quietly. I've been discreet my whole life. Reverend, proper, careful. And where did it get me alone at 37, starting over in a frontier town? Perhaps it's time I stopped being so concerned with what others think. After he left, shaking his head, Mrs. Morley chuckled. Good for you, dear. Though you might want to warn that young man of yours about the hornet's nest that's been stirred up. Rebecca started to protest that Wyatt wasn't hers, but the words died unspoken. The truth was, she didn't know what they were to each other. 2 weeks of careful friendship in public and stolen glances across the classroom weren't enough to build certainty on. That evening, she was grading papers when she heard a soft tap at her window. Wyatt stood outside, hat in hand, face grave. Heard about this morning, he said when she opened the window. Rebecca, I'm sorry, this is my fault. How is Harriet Jameson's spitefulness your fault? If I'd stayed away, then the children would have missed wonderful lessons, and I would have missed... She stopped, suddenly aware they were having this conversation through a window like characters in a Shakespeare play. Maybe I should stop coming to the school, he said quietly. Don't want to cause you trouble. No. The word came out more forcefully than intended. I won't let her win. Wyatt, I won't let fear and propriety dictate my life anymore. It's your reputation, your job. My choice. She reached through the window, touched his hand. Unless you'd rather stop coming, I'd understand if... Only thing I want to stop is causing you pain. He turned her hand over, traced her palm with one finger. But seems like I'm doing that just by existing. The only pain you cause is when you talk about leaving. They stood there, hands linked through the window, while evening settled over Dust Creek. Finally, Wyatt squeezed her fingers gently and stepped back. Friday, she confirmed. After he left, Rebecca returned to her grading, but her mind kept wandering. She thought about Mrs. Jameson's cutting words, about the Reverend's well-meaning advice, about Anna's simple wisdom. Most of all, she thought about choices, the ones she'd made, the ones ahead. That night, she wrote a letter to her former colleagues in Missouri, telling them about her new life. She found herself defending Wyatt, describing his intelligence and kindness, the way he enriched her classroom. As she wrote, she realized she was really defending her own choices, arguing with a voice in her head that sounded remarkably like Harriet Jameson. The next morning, Rebecca walked to school with her head high, meeting every stare directly. Let them talk, let them judge. She had work to do, children to teach, a life to build on her own terms. In the afternoon, Otto Schultz stopped by the schoolhouse. My Anna tells me someone's been giving you trouble. Rebecca started to brush it off, but the big blacksmith held up a hand. This town needs good teacher. You are a good teacher. My Anna learns more in weeks with you than all last year. He fixed her with a steady gaze. You have friends here. Miss Linley. Don't forget. Similar visits followed over the next few days. Mrs. Patterson brought fresh bread and assurances of support. Several ranch families stopped by to express appreciation for her teaching. Even gruff Sam Parson mentioned that some folks ought to mind their own business. Rebecca began to understand that while Harriet Jameson might be loud, she didn't speak for everyone. Dust Creek was made up of people who'd come west for their own reasons, many of them fleeing judgment or seeking fresh starts. They understood about second chances and choosing your own path. Friday came with a crisp fall breeze that sent leaves skittering down Main Street. Rebecca arrived at school to find Wyatt already there, repairing a shutter that had come loose. Wasn't sure you'd come, she admitted. Said I would. He climbed down from his ladder, studied her face. You look tired. It's been a difficult week. Because of me. Because of small minds and cruel tongues. Not you, never you. He looked like he wanted to say more, but the children began arriving. As always, Wyatt's presence transformed the classroom. Today's lesson was about reading weather signs, and the students hung on every word as he explained cloud formations and wind patterns. When class ended and the children dispersed, Wyatt lingered, helping her straighten desks. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said, choosing our own path. You're right. I've spent so long accepting what others said about my place that I forgot I could choose different. What are you saying? He met her eyes. I'm saying maybe it's time I stopped letting fear make my decisions. Time I started reaching for what I want instead of just accepting what I think I deserve. Rebecca's heart began to race. And what do you want? Same thing I've wanted since I pulled you out of that broken wagon. He moved closer. You, Rebecca Linley, despite the age difference, despite the talk, despite everything that says it's impossible, I want you. Before she could respond, he kissed her, there in the schoolhouse with the afternoon sun slanting through windows and chalk dust dancing in the air. It wasn't gentle like their first kiss. It was declaration and promise and defiance all at once. When they parted, Rebecca was breathless. The windows anyone could see. Let them. His green eyes blazed with determination. I'm tired of hiding. Tired of pretending I don't care about the finest woman I've ever known just because some folks think I'm not good enough. You're more than good enough. Rebecca whispered, You're everything. He cupped her face in his work-roughened hands. Then let's stop letting others write our story. Whatever comes the gossip, the judgment, the obstacles, we'll face it together. Rebecca thought about Harriet Jameson's poisonous words, about reputation and propriety, and all the careful rules she'd lived by for 37 years. Then she thought about Anna's simple truth, mister. Callan makes you smile and made her choice. Together, she agreed, and sealed the promise with another kiss. Sunday afternoon cast long shadows across the cemetery behind the church. Rebecca knelt by a small grave, clearing away dried leaves from the simple wooden marker. Mary Chen's grave, the little girl who died of fever the previous winter, before Rebecca's arrival. She'd taken to tending it, knowing the child's father was too grief-stricken to visit often. Didn't expect to find you here. She looked up to see Wyatt standing among the headstones, hat in hand. The past week had been a delicate dance of public propriety and private understanding since their declaration in the schoolhouse. I come sometimes. It feels wrong that she has no mother to tend her resting place. Rebecca straightened, brushing dirt from her skirts. What brings you to town on a Sunday? You, the simple honesty of it made her heart skip. Been doing some thinking. Mind if we walk? They strolled through the cemetery and out onto the prairie path that led toward the creek. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and distant snow from the mountains. I went to see Jameson yesterday, Wyatt said abruptly. Rebecca stopped walking. You did what? Went to his ranch, man to man. Told him his wife needs to leave you be. Wyatt, you shouldn't have... He heard me out. Don't think he much enjoys his wife's crusades either. Said he'd speak to her. Wyatt's jaw tightened. Also told him if she keeps attacking you, she'll answer to me. You can't fight my battles for me. Not fighting them for you. Fighting them with you. Difference. He turned to face her fully. But that's not really what I need to say. Rebecca waited, watching emotions chase across his face. You asked what I want. I said you. That's truth, but it's not the whole truth. He took a breath. Rebecca, you're educated, refined. You've got a profession, respect. I'm just a ranch hand who can barely write a proper letter. You say that doesn't matter, but... It doesn't... Let me finish, please. His voice was strained. Every time I'm with you, I feel like I'm stealing something that's not meant for me. Like I'm holding you back from the life you should have. Man closer to your age, with education and prospects. Stop! Rebecca's voice came out sharper than intended. Just stop! She walked to a fallen log near the creek and sat down hard, suddenly exhausted. Wyatt followed uncertainly. Do you want to know why I came west? She asked. The real reason. He nodded, settling beside her but maintaining careful distance. I was engaged once, back in Missouri. His name was Charles Whitman. He was everything proper good family. University education, promising career in banking. He was also 8 years younger than me. She laughed bitterly. Everyone said how lucky I was. Spinster teacher catching such a suitable man. Wyatt remained silent, letting her speak. For 2 years, we courted, always proper, always appropriate. Then his mother decided I was too old to give him children, too set in my ways to be a suitable wife. She convinced him to break the engagement. Rebecca picked up a pebble, threw it into the creek. He came to me with rehearsed words about duty and family expectations. Never once asked what I wanted, never fought for us. Rebecca, I'm 37 years old, Wyatt. I've been patient and proper and careful my whole life. I've let others decide what's suitable for me, what I deserve, what I should want. I came west to escape that, to find out who Rebecca Lindley is when she's not trying to fit everyone else's expectations. She turned to him, eyes blazing. And then I met you. You, who brings me wildflowers and fixes my roof and makes my students light up with joy. You, who reads poetry in secret and sends money home to family and really sees me not as an aging spinster or a proper teacher, but as a woman. You are too good for me, Wyatt said quietly. According to who Harriet Jameson, the same social rules that said I should be grateful for Charles's attention, that say I'm past the age for love. She stood, pacing in frustration. I don't care about suitable anymore. Wyatt, I care about laughter and kindness and the way I feel when you look at me. I care about building something real, not something approved by committee. And if people make your life miserable because of me, then we face it together, like you said. Or are you taking that back now? Wyatt stood, caught her hands. No, never. I want to be sure you understand what you're choosing. I'm choosing you, Rebecca said simply. A man who thinks he's not enough, but who gives more of himself than anyone I've known. Who worries more about my reputation than I do. Who makes me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I can't give you a fine house or fancy things. I don't want fancy things. I want Sunday walks and Friday afternoons, and someone who knows that Wordsworth wrote about ordinary people because their lives matter too. Wyatt pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. How'd you get so wise? 37 years of making mistakes. She touched his face. This isn't one of them. They stood by the creek, holding each other as the sun slanted lower. Finally, Wyatt spoke again. If we truly do this, I want to do it right. Court you proper, as much as this town allows. Let everyone see I'm proud to be with you, not sneaking around like we're ashamed. People will talk more. Let them, I've been thinking about what that little Anna said, about people not liking when others are happy. Well, I'd like to be happy. With you. Rebecca smiled. I'd like that too. They began walking back toward town, not touching but walking closer than before. As they neared the cemetery, Wyatt spoke again. I've been saving money. Not much, but steady. Thinking about maybe trying to get my own small spread someday. Raise horses, maybe, rather than cattle. Man with his own land, his own business. That's something more than just a drifting cowhand. You don't have to change for me. Not changing for you. Changing for me, because you make me want to be more than I settled for. He glanced at her. Question is, would a teacher consider marrying a horse rancher someday, when he'd saved enough? Rebecca's heart stopped, then raced. Is that a proposal? Call it a statement of intent. I know we need time. Need to do this proper. But I want you to know I'm not playing at this. Rebecca, when I think about the future now, you're in every picture. A horse ranch sounds lovely. She managed through the tightness in her throat. Though I'd want to keep teaching. Wouldn't have it any other way. Children need you. He paused. Maybe our own children too. Someday, if you want. I know people say, well, about age and such. I'm not too old, Rebecca said firmly, remembering Charles's mother's cruel words. Women my age have children. Not as easily, perhaps, but it happens. Then we'll hope for it. And if it doesn't happen, we'll have each other and a whole schoolhouse of children to care about. They reached the edge of town as twilight painted the sky purple and gold. A few people were about, heading home from Sunday visits. Wyatt offered Rebecca his arm, formally, publicly. May I escort you home, Miss Linley? Rebecca saw curtains twitch, knew tongues would wag. She took his arm without hesitation. I'd be honored, Mr. Callan. They walked down Main Street like any courting couple, heads high, pace measured, Mrs. Morley was on her porch and waved cheerfully. Otto Schultz, closing up his shop, nodded approvingly. But Rebecca also saw less friendly faces, Mrs. Jameson glaring from her carriage, other women whispering behind their hands. At the boarding house gate, Wyatt took her hand, bowed over it formally. May I call on you next Sunday, Miss Linley? Perhaps another walk. I'd enjoy that very much. He hesitated, then leaned closer. Voice for her alone. I love you, Rebecca. No, it's too soon to say, but I want you to know. Whatever storms come, that won't change. Rebecca squeezed his hand. It's not too soon. Not when you've been waiting 37 years to hear it. She met his eyes. I love you too. Wyatt, against all logic and propriety and good sense. Best things in life don't make sense, he murmured. Then louder. Good evening, Miss Linley. Good evening, Mr. Callan. She watched him walk away, then turned to find Mrs. Morley beaming from the doorway. About time you two stopped circling each other like nervous cats. Come in, dear. Supper's ready. And you can tell me all about your walk. Over the meal, Rebecca found herself speaking freely about her feelings, her hopes, Wyatt's plans for the future. Mrs. Morley listened with obvious approval. Horse ranch is a good business if managed right, and that young man's got the touch with animals. She refilled Rebecca's tea. Don't let the Harriet Jamesons of the world rob you of happiness. Dear, life's too short and love's too rare. I'm through letting others dictate my choices, Rebecca said firmly. Whatever comes, we'll weather it. That night, she lay in bed thinking about the day's conversations, the cemetery where small Mary Chen lay, reminder of life's fragility. Wyatt's worried attempts to give her an escape, born of love, not doubt. His declaration of future intentions, the promise of something building toward permanence. She thought too about Charles, who'd chosen family approval over love, the contrast with Wyatt, who was ready to face social censure for the chance to be with her, couldn't be starker. One had offered her propriety without passion. The other offered passion with the promise to build propriety on their own terms. Outside, a coyote called across the prairie, answered by another. Even wild things sought companionship under the vast Wyoming sky. At 37, Rebecca Lindley had finally learned to be wild enough to reach for what she wanted, wise enough to know its value, and brave enough to hold on despite the storms ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she fell asleep with Wyatt's words echoing in her heart. "I love you, Rebecca." 4 words that made her feel younger than she had in years, full of possibility and hope. The spinster teacher was choosing a different story, and she could hardly wait to see how it would unfold. The morning of the Christmas program dawned cold and clear, with frost painting delicate patterns on the schoolhouse windows. Rebecca had been preparing for this day for weeks, and it represented more than just a holiday celebration. It was the culmination of her first term in Dust Creek, proof of what she and her students had accomplished together. She arrived early to find a wrapped package on her desk, no name attached. Inside was a leather-bound volume of Wordsworth's complete works, far finer than her worn copy. On the flyleaf, in increasingly confident handwriting, Wyatt had inscribed, "For the teacher who taught me that words matter, W.C." Rebecca traced the letters with her finger, noting how much his penmanship had improved in their evening sessions. 3 nights a week now, after courting walks and quiet dinners, they would sit at Mrs. Morley's kitchen table while Rebecca helped him with reading and writing. He was a quick student, hungry for knowledge he'd been denied in youth. "That's a beautiful book." She turned to find Anna Schultz in the doorway, already dressed in her costume for the play. "Yes, it is. Are you ready for tonight?" Anna nodded, then bit her lip. "Miss Lindley, I'm glad you didn't leave." "Leave? Why would I leave?" "That's what Mrs. Jameson told my mother, that you'd be gone by Christmas because of the scandal." The girl's face was serious. "But Papa told her to mind her own business." In German, loudly. Rebecca hid a smile. "Well, I'm not going anywhere. Now, help me arrange these chairs." By evening, the schoolhouse was transformed. Pine boughs decorated the windows. Candles cast warm light, and every bench was packed with families. The children waited in the cloakroom, excitement and nerves making them giggle and whisper. Rebecca stood before the gathered crowd, aware of the divided attention, some faces warm with support, others cool with judgment. She'd chosen her best dress, a deep blue wool that Wyatt said matched her eyes. "Welcome, everyone, to our Christmas program. The children have worked very hard to share the spirit of the season with you." The evening unfolded beautifully. The younger children recited poems, their sweet voices filling the room. Jorge Martinez played his father's guitar while the Henning twins sang Silent Night in harmony. Thomas Patterson, transformed from sullen to engaged over the term, delivered a dramatic reading from Dickens that had his mother dabbing her eyes. Anna Schultz narrated the nativity play with clear confidence, while the other children acted out the scenes. Even Robert Patterson, wearing a shepherd's costume and managing the improvised sheep, 2 of the smaller children under a blanket, stayed focused and serious. Throughout it all, Rebecca was aware of Wyatt standing at the back of the room. He'd cleaned up after his day's work, wearing his Sunday clothes. Their eyes met often across the crowd, silent communication that steadied her nerves. When the program concluded, parents crowded forward to congratulate their children, and Rebecca, she was accepting Mrs. Patterson's tearful thanks when Harriet Jameson approached. "Adequate, I suppose," the woman said coldly, "though I question the propriety of including that Mexican child so prominently. Jorge Martinez is as much a part of this community as anyone," Rebecca replied calmly. "Is he, just as you consider yourself part of this community while carrying on with—" "Mrs. Jameson," Wyatt's voice cut through her words. He stepped beside Rebecca, not touching but clearly aligned with her. I believe your husband is looking for you." Indeed, Harold Jameson was making his way over, his face resigned. "Come, Harriet, beautiful program. Miss Linley, you've done wonders with these children." As they moved away, Rebecca heard him murmur to his wife about leaving well enough alone. The support from unexpected quarters warmed her more than the heated room. "Thank you," she said quietly to Wyatt. "No need, just speaking truth." He glanced around the thinning crowd. "Walk you home." They strolled through the cold evening, snow crunching under their feet. Other couples and families were making their way home too. The night filled with called good nights and children's laughter. "The book is beautiful," Rebecca said. "You didn't need to." "Wanted to. You gave me words. Rebecca, least I can do is give some back." He offered his arm as they navigated an icy patch. "Been thinking about what you said, about Wordsworth writing about ordinary people." "Yes, made me realize something. We're all just ordinary people trying to live extraordinary lives. You, me, everyone in that schoolhouse tonight. Doesn't matter if we're teachers or cowhands or anything else. What matters is how we treat each other, how we build something together." They paused outside the boarding house, where warm light spilled from the windows. Through the glass, Rebecca could see Mrs. Morley decorating a small Christmas tree. "I've been thinking too," Rebecca said. "About time." Wyatt's brow furrowed. "Time. How we assume we have so much of it. How I waited 37 years to feel what I feel with you." She turned to face him fully. "I don't want to waste any more time being careful. Wyatt, life's too short and too uncertain." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you're serious about that statement of intent you made by the creek, I don't need a long courtship to know my answer." His eyes widened. "Rebecca, are you—" "I'm saying yes. Whenever you're ready to ask, I'm saying yes." Wyatt stared at her for a long moment, then laughed a sound of pure joy that made passing townsfolk turn and smile. "You never do anything the expected way, do you?" "I've tried the expected way. I prefer our way." He glanced around, saw they had an audience, and seemed to make a decision. Right there on Main Street, with snow beginning to fall and half the town watching, Wyatt Callan dropped to one knee. "Then I'm asking, Rebecca Linley, will you marry me? I don't have a ring yet. Don't have much to offer except hard work and promises. But I love you more than I knew was possible. Will you take a chance on a cowhand who's learning to be more?" Rebecca's tears blurred the watching faces, the falling snow, everything but Wyatt's earnest green eyes. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He stood and kissed her, there in public for all to see. Some cheered. She heard Otto Schultz's booming approval and Mrs. Morley's delighted laughter. Others turned away in disapproval. Rebecca couldn't bring herself to care. "Inside, both of you, before you freeze," Mrs. Morley called. "This calls for celebration." The boarding house parlor filled with well-wishers. Word spread quickly, and soon half the town seemed crowded into the small space. Reverend Davies offered to perform the ceremony. Sam Parson promised to order a dress from his catalog. The Patterson boys, still in their costume remnants, whooped with delight when they heard their teacher was staying permanently. Through it all, Rebecca kept finding Wyatt's hand, confirming this was real. He looked slightly stunned by the speed of events, but deeply happy. "When?" someone asked. Rebecca and Wyatt looked at each other. "Soon," they said in unison, then laughed. "New Year's Day," Mrs. Morley suggested. "New beginning for a new year." "But that's only a week away," Rebecca protested. "You just said you didn't want to waste time," Wyatt reminded her, grinning. "Besides, I'd marry you tomorrow if the Reverend would allow it." Late that night, after the impromptu party had dispersed, Rebecca sat in her room updating her journal. So much had changed since she'd first written about the cowhand who'd rescued her from a broken wagon. A soft knock at her door interrupted her writing. Mrs. Morley entered with 2 cups of cocoa. "Thought you might need this," Big night. The biggest. Rebecca accepted the cup gratefully. Am I crazy? We've known each other barely 4 months. Sometimes 4 months is enough. Sometimes 4 minutes is enough. The older woman settled into the spare chair. My Herbert proposed after 2 weeks. Stayed married 43 years until the good Lord took him. People will say I'm desperate, that he's marrying me for security, or I'm marrying him for... I don't even know what they'll say. People will always talk. Dear, question is, do you love him? More than I thought possible. Does he love you? He shows me every day. Then that's all that matters. Mrs. Morley stood, patted Rebecca's shoulder. Besides, I think you two have been courting since the day you met. Just took you a while to notice. After she left, Rebecca returned to her journal. By New Year's Day, I'll be Rebecca Callan. The spinster teacher will become a rancher's wife, though I'll keep teaching. Wyatt insists on it. We'll build a life together, ordinary perhaps by some standards, but extraordinary to us. Today the children shone in their Christmas program. Tonight, Wyatt proposed on Main Street with snow falling around us. A week from now, we'll speak vows in the little church. I came west looking for a new beginning. I found so much more love, community, purpose, and a man who sees me truly. At 37, I'm finally beginning the life I was meant to live. The wait was long, but the reward is sweet. Tomorrow I'll wake in this same room, but everything has changed. I'm no longer alone, no longer waiting. I'm Rebecca Linley, teacher, soon-to-be wife, believer in extraordinary, ordinary lives. And I am happier than I ever dreamed possible. She closed the journal and prepared for bed, pausing at the window to watch snow blanket the town. Somewhere out there, Wyatt was probably looking at the same snow, perhaps as amazed as she was by the turn their lives had taken. 1 week until she became his wife. After 37 years of patient waiting, 1 week seemed both forever and no time at all. But then, the best things in life were worth waiting for. And Wyatt Callan, her unlikely cowboy poet, was definitely worth the wait. The morning after New Year's Day dawned bright and cold. Ice crystals glittering on every surface like nature's celebration of the wedding that had taken place the day before. Rebecca Callan now. She reminded herself with a thrill stood at the window of the small cabin Wyatt had prepared for them on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it was theirs. Coffee's ready, Wyatt called from the kitchen. She joined him, accepting the warm cup gratefully. They stood together in comfortable silence, still marveling at the change in their circumstances. The wedding had been simple but perfect, the church filled with wildflowers despite the winter season misses. Morley's doing. Rebecca in a borrowed dress that had belonged to the Reverend's wife, and Wyatt looking handsomer than ever in a new suit Sam Parson had expedited from Denver. I should get ready for school, Rebecca said eventually. The children return today. About that, Wyatt set down his cup, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Got something to tell you. Rebecca's heart sank. What is it? Mr. Kowalski needs me to drive cattle down to Kansas. Big sale. Could set us up real nice for starting that horse ranch we talked about. He took her hands. But it means being gone for near 2 months. The news hit Rebecca like cold water. They'd been married exactly 1 day, and already he was leaving. She fought to keep her voice steady. When? Week from today. I know it's bad timing, but the money... He trailed off, studying her face. If you want me to stay, I will. Job's not worth making you unhappy. Rebecca thought about all the times she'd chosen safety over possibility, propriety over desire. This was different. This was about building their future. No, she said firmly. You should go. We need the money if we're going to build the life we want. She managed a smile. Besides, I've waited 37 years for you. I can manage 2 months more. Relief and regret warred in his expression. "I'll write every town we stop in. I'll send letters. And I'll be here when you return." She kissed him softly. "Now I really do need to get to school." The week flew by in a blur of stolen moments and preparation. Rebecca threw herself into teaching, trying not to count the days. The children were delighted with her new name and status, though some parents remained cool. Harriet Jameson had left town to visit her sister, claiming she couldn't bear to witness such foolishness, which everyone considered a wedding gift in itself. The morning Wyatt left, Rebecca walked him to where the other cowboys were gathering, 6 men in all, with extra horses and provisions for the long journey. She kept her composure as they said goodbye in front of the others, but Wyatt must have seen something in her eyes. "Walk with me a minute," he asked, leading her away from the group. Out of sight behind the livery stable, he pulled her into his arms. "I hate leaving you." "Then come back to me." She memorized his face, the green eyes, the scar through his eyebrow, the way his hat sat slightly crooked. Safe and whole. "Promise." He kissed her deeply, then reached into his coat. "Almost forgot. Made you something." It was a small wooden heart, polished smooth, with their initials carved on one side and a line of poetry on the other. "If love be ours, then all the world is home." "You've been reading without me," Rebecca accused through tears. Had to find the right words. He closed her fingers around the heart. "Keep this till I get back. Always." One more kiss, and he was gone, striding back to the waiting men. Rebecca watched until the group disappeared into the distance, then walked slowly to the schoolhouse, the wooden heart clutched in her hand. The first letter came 2 weeks later. "My dearest Rebecca, we've made good time to North Platte. The weather's held, though nights are cold. I miss your warmth beside me. The other fellows tease me for writing so much, but I don't care. I'm practicing my letters, thinking how proud you'll be when you see how much better I write. Saw a family heading west yesterday. Reminded me of you coming to Dust Creek. The woman looked tired but determined, like you must have looked. Made me grateful all over again that your wagon broke down where it did. I love you. Say hello to Mrs. Morley and the students. Your devoted husband, Wyatt." Rebecca read it so many times she memorized every word. She wrote back immediately, filling pages with news of the town, her students, her dreams for their future. She sent the letter with the next mail coach and settled in to wait for the next one. Teaching helped pass the time. Without Wyatt's Friday visits, she invited other community members to share their knowledge. Otto Schultz demonstrated blacksmithing basics. Mrs. Chen taught the children to count in Chinese, and even Sam Parson gave a lesson on running a business. The second letter came from Ogallala. "Beloved, trail's been harder this stretch. Lost 2 cattle crossing a river, but the rest are healthy. I've been remembering our ride to Sentinel Ridge. How beautiful you looked in the moonlight. The moon's the same here, but it's lonelier without you. Met a man who's selling horse stock in Kansas. Good bloodlines, fair prices. I'm thinking if this sale goes well, we could start with 3 or 4 mares. What do you think?" The fellows have stopped teasing about my writing. Last night, Jenkins asked if I'd help him write to his girl back in Texas. Seems you've made a teacher of me too. "Oh, my love, Wyatt." Rebecca carried the letters with her always, reading them during lunch breaks or quiet evenings. Mrs. Morley kept her company often, sharing meals and stories of her own marriage. The separations were hard, the older woman admitted one evening. Herbert traveled for business sometimes, but it made the reunion sweeter. March arrived with unexpected warmth, melting the snow and bringing the first hints of spring. Rebecca received what would be the last letter from Dodge City. "My darling wife, sales complete better price than we hoped. I've bought 4 mares and a young stallion with excellent lines. They'll travel back with us, along with my dreams for our future. If all goes well, I'll be home before this letter reaches you. I'm writing anyway because I need to tell you these 2 months have taught me something. I knew I loved you when I left. But now I understand what love really means. It's not just wanting to be with someone. It's feeling incomplete when you're apart. It's seeing beautiful things and wishing you could share them. It's lying awake at night thinking of all the words you want to say. I've written you poems I'm too embarrassed to send. Maybe someday I'll be brave enough to share them. For now, know that every mile brings me closer to home. And home isn't a place, it's wherever you are. Yours forever, Wyatt. Rebecca was reading this letter for the dozenth time when she heard commotion outside the schoolhouse. Horses, lots of them, and men's voices calling to each other. Her heart leaped. "Class, please continue reading silently," she managed, though her hands trembled. She stepped onto the porch to see the cattle drive returning. Dust-covered cowboys driving horses through town toward the livery. And there, riding a beautiful bay stallion, was Wyatt. Their eyes met across the distance. He touched his hat brim in that familiar gesture, and Rebecca forgot all propriety. She picked up her skirts and ran, not caring who saw or what they thought. Wyatt swung down from his horse just in time to catch her. "You're home," she breathed against his neck, inhaling the scent of trail dust and leather and him. "Told you I would be." He held her tight, right there on Main Street with the whole town watching. "God, I missed you." "Class dismissed," Rebecca called over her shoulder, laughing as children poured out to see the commotion. Several ran to greet fathers and brothers returning from the drive. "Don't you need to—" Wyatt began. "What I need is my husband. The children can have an early day." She pulled back to look at him, cataloging changes, darker tan, a few new lines around his eyes, a scruffiness that made him look appealingly rugged. "You look tired." "Long trail, worth every mile." He gestured to where the other men were managing the horses. "Come see what I brought home." The horses were beautiful 3 chestnut mares, one black and a stallion the color of burnished gold. Even to Rebecca's untrained eye, they were quality animals. "The start of our ranch," Wyatt said proudly. "With what I saved and earned, we can buy some land, build proper facilities. It'll take time, but—" "We have time," Rebecca squeezed his hand. "All the time in the world." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the livery, Wyatt introducing her to each horse, explaining his plans. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Rebecca found herself caught up in dreams of pastures and foals and a business built together. That evening, in their small cabin, they sat close on the porch watching the sunset. Wyatt had bathed and shaved, looking more like himself but with a new confidence earned on the trail. "I learned something while I was gone," he said quietly. "All my life, I've felt like I was reaching for things beyond my grasp. Education, respect, love. Like I was trying to be more than I was meant to be. And now I know better. I'm not reaching beyond myself, I'm growing into myself, into the man you somehow saw from the beginning." He turned to her. "You gave me that, Rebecca, the courage to want more." "You always had it," she corrected. "You just needed someone to remind you." He pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. "Speaking of courage, I wrote you something. On the trail. Don't laugh." Rebecca unfolded the paper, recognizing his greatly improved handwriting. "Prairie grass bends but doesn't break, teaching what we need to know. That strength comes not from standing rigid, but from learning how to flow. You are my prairie, wide and honest. You are my shelter from the storm. In your eyes I find my horizon. In your arms I find my home." "Wyatt," she whispered, tears blurring the words. "It's beautiful." "It's not Wordsworth." "It's better. It's yours. Ours." She kissed him softly. "I love you so much." Later, as they prepared for bed, Rebecca showed him how she'd arranged their few belongings, the small changes she'd made to turn the cabin into a home. The wooden heart he'd carved sat in a place of honor on the mantel. "I know it's not much," she said, suddenly aware of how humble their surroundings were. "It's everything." Wyatt pulled her close. You're here. That makes it perfect. As they lay together in the darkness, finally reunited. Rebecca thought about the journey that had brought them here. A broken wagon wheel, a kind stranger, a spinster teacher, and a cowboy poet finding in each other what they hadn't known they were looking for. No more long separations. Wyatt murmured against her hair. From now on, where I go, you go. And where you stay, I stay, Rebecca completed, remembering the biblical words. Outside, a wolf howled somewhere in the distance, answered by its mate. The sound that might have frightened her once now seemed fitting wild creatures calling to each other across the darkness, affirming their bond. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Building a ranch, maintaining her teaching position, proving the doubters wrong. But tonight, safe in Wyatt's arms with spring approaching and dreams taking shape, Rebecca Callan was exactly where she belonged. The wooden heart on the mantel caught the last of the firelight, its carved words a promise and a truth. If love be ours, then all the world is home. And it was. 1 year later, spring had returned to Dust Creek in full glory. Rebecca stood in the doorway of their new house, a proper home now, with 3 rooms and real glass windows that faced east as Wyatt had promised. Beyond the porch, she could see the pastures where a dozen horses grazed, including 2 new foals that wobbled on spindly legs beside their mothers. Mrs. Callan, you'll be late for school, Wyatt called from the barn, where he was working with the stallion. Rebecca smiled at the gentle teasing. Even after a year of marriage, hearing herself called Mrs. Callan still sent a thrill through her. She gathered her teaching materials, including a new primer Wyatt had surprised her with from his last trip to Cheyenne. The ride to school had become one of her favorite parts of the day. Wyatt had taught her to ride properly, and she now sat her mare with confidence. The 2-mile journey gave her time to transition from ranch wife to teacher, though in truth, the roles had blended seamlessly. At the schoolhouse, she found a familiar figure repairing the front step. Thomas Patterson, what are you doing here? The young man, no longer the sullen boy she'd first met, grinned up at her. Graduated. Remember, but I figured the school could use some maintenance. Pa's paying me to do odd jobs around town until I decide what's next. And what might be next? He ducked his head, embarrassed. Was thinking maybe teacher's college in Laramie? You showed me there's more to life than just following expectations. Rebecca's throat tightened. That's wonderful. Thomas, you'll make an excellent teacher. As he worked, she prepared for the day's lessons. Her class had grown to 18 students, including several new families who'd moved to the area specifically because of the school's reputation. Even Harriet Jameson, who'd returned from her extended visit considerably subdued, had grudgingly admitted that the town was fortunate to have kept their teacher. The morning passed peacefully, with the younger children practicing their letters while the older ones worked through a geography lesson. At lunch, Rebecca was surprised to see Wyatt's horse tied outside. She found him in the small garden she'd started behind the school, holding a basket. Thought you might enjoy a picnic, he said. It's a beautiful day, and I have news. They spread a blanket under the cottonwood tree. As Rebecca unpacked the food, including fresh bread from Mrs. Morley, who still insisted on sending treats, Wyatt's excitement was palpable. Mr. Kowalski wants to partner with us, he announced. He's impressed with our horses, wants to go in together on a bigger operation. Says I have the best eye for horseflesh he's seen. Wyatt, that's wonderful. Gets better. With his backing, we can expand faster, maybe even supply horses to the army fort north of here. He took her hands. We're building something real, Rebecca, something lasting. We are, she agreed, then took a breath. And we might be building something else, too. Wyatt's brow furrowed in confusion. Then his eyes widened as understanding dawned. Are we? I saw Doc Morrison yesterday. He thinks early November. Wyatt pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at once. A baby. We're having a baby. You're not disappointed. I know we wanted to establish the ranch first. Disappointed? He pulled back to look at her, eyes shining. Rebecca, this is everything. Everything I never dared dream of. They sat together under the tree, planning and dreaming, until Rebecca reluctantly returned to her classroom. The afternoon seemed to glow with new possibility. After school, Anna Schultz lingered as usual. At 13, she'd become Rebecca's unofficial assistant, helping with the younger children. Mrs. Callan, you look extra happy today. Do I? Like you're keeping a secret, a good one. The girl's perception remained sharp as ever. My mama looked like that before she told us about the new baby coming. Rebecca smiled. Your mama is a wise woman. Speaking of which, how would you feel about helping me more with the little ones next term? I might need an extra pair of hands. Anna's face lit up. Really, I'd love to. She paused. Does this mean what I think it means? Let's keep it between us for now, shall we? As Anna skipped off, Rebecca reflected on how much had changed. The girl who defended her that first difficult week had grown into a young woman, serious about her own education and already talking about becoming a teacher herself. The ride home was peaceful, with afternoon sun warming her shoulders and birds singing in the sagebrush. As she approached their property, Rebecca felt the now familiar surge of pride. The small cabin had been expanded into a real home. New fencing marked proper pastures. A larger barn housed their growing herd. And everywhere were signs of Wyatt's careful work, from the vegetable garden he'd helped her plant to the rocking chair he'd built for the porch. She found him there, on that chair, reading. The sight still made her heart skip her cowboy poet, no longer hiding his love of words. Good book. Your old friend Wordsworth, he said, setting it aside to help her dismount. Though I'd rather hear about your day. They sat together on the porch, sharing the small details that made up a life. Rebecca told him about Thomas's plans, Anna's perceptiveness, the new family considering moving to town. Wyatt shared news of the horses, plans for expansion, his correspondence with buyers in Denver. Mrs. Morley stopped by, he added. Brought a cake and said to tell you she's knitting something small and yellow. Woman doesn't miss anything. We'll have to make an announcement soon. Tomorrow after church. Rebecca nodded, then leaned against his shoulder. Are you happy? Wyatt. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He was quiet for a moment. Sometimes I wake up and can't believe this is my life. That you're my wife. That we're building this place together. That now. His hand found her still flat stomach. Now we're building a family too. I know the feeling. A year ago, I thought my life was set teaching other people's children, growing old alone. Now look at us. The spinster and the cowhand, Wyatt said with a grin. We showed them all, didn't we? We showed ourselves, Rebecca corrected. That's what matters. As evening settled over the ranch, they moved inside for supper. The house was simple still, but filled with touches that made it home books on every surface, wildflowers in a jar, the wooden heart on the mantel, and now, tiny yellow booties peeking out of Mrs. Morley's basket. Later, as they prepared for bed, Wyatt showed her a letter he'd received. From my brother in Kentucky. Wants to come visit, maybe stay if there's work. He looked uncertain. I know we haven't talked much about my family. Of course he should come. Family is always welcome. You sure he's young? Might be looking for direction. Then he'll fit right in. Seems to be what Dust Creek does best, helping people find their way. They lay together in the darkness, making quiet plans. The ranch was thriving, the school was flourishing, and new life grew between them. It wasn't the path either had imagined in younger days, but it was theirs, carved out of prairie grass and determination and love that had surprised them both. I've been thinking about names, Wyatt said softly. Already. If it's a girl, Emily, maybe after my mother? Emily Callan. I like it. And if it's a boy, you choose. Rebecca thought for a moment. William, after Wordsworth. Wyatt laughed. Raising a poet or a teacher, either way. Or a rancher, or all three. All three, he agreed. Why set limits? Outside, a spring storm was building, lightning flickering on the horizon. But inside their home, all was warm and safe and full of promise. Rebecca thought of her journey from abandoned bride to frontier teacher to beloved wife, and now, soon, mother. Each role had prepared her for the next. Each challenge overcome had made her stronger. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. For what? For seeing me, the real me, for being brave enough to love me despite everything that said you shouldn't. Wyatt pulled her closer. Thank you for teaching me I was worth more than I knew, for believing in the man I could become. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The spring storm would water the earth, nourish the grass, prepare the ground for new growth. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys. But tonight, in their house with windows facing east toward endless possibilities, Rebecca and Wyatt Callan held each other and their dreams, knowing that the best stories, the ones about ordinary people living extraordinary lives, were just beginning. The wooden heart on the mantel stood witness to their love, its carved message a truth proven daily. If love be ours, then all the world is home. And in a small town called Dust Creek, where the prairie met the mountains and second chances bloomed like wildflowers after rain, home was exactly what they'd found. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Rebecca and Wyatt's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please comment below and let me know your thoughts on their story. Did you believe in their love despite the odds? What was your favorite moment? If you enjoyed this tale from the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 for more authentic stories of love, courage, and adventure from the Old West. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover these forgotten stories of the heart. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your dreams.